The predicted crime had come to pass, and the victim was someone she had known, a figure quietly woven into her life's fragile tapestry. The rain outside the library's stained glass windows drummed a sorrowful rhythm against the ancient stone, as if the very building mourned with her. She clutched the cold receiver, her breath shallow, eyes wide with disbelief and pain. The loss was not just a statistic in the cipher's unfolding narrative. It was a wrenching blow that shattered the thin veneer of control she had been clinging to. Her heart pounded with a tumult of emotions: grief, rage, helplessness. Sensed somewhere beneath it all, a fierce determination ignited. She would not be another casualty of this cryptic fate. Later that evening, the library seemed to close in around her. The shadows lengthened as she wandered through the stacks, the scent of old paper and dust thick in the air. Mina found her there, sitting cross-legged on the floor amid scattered volumes, her notes abandoned. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the unspoken weight between them was palpable. Alara's voice cracked as she spoke, her frustration spilling over in sharp words that startled even herself. "You don't understand, Mina. Nothing we do matters if the cycle is unbreakable." Mina's loyal gaze never wavered, but the tension between them was undeniable. The friendship that had been a balm now felt fragile, strained by the relentless pressure of their quest. Seeking guidance, Alara approached Professor Alden Gray the next day. His gaunt figure was silhouetted against the cluttered shelves of his office, the faint scent of tobacco and old leather mingling with the quiet hum of the university. His eyes, piercing and unreadable, softened briefly as he regarded her. "The pursuit of forbidden knowledge exacts a cost," he murmured, his voice low but carrying weight. "You are at a precipice, Alara. The question is whether you will fall or find footing on the other side." The cryptic warning resonated deeply, mingling with Alara's own fears and hopes. Meanwhile, Jasper Lang's challenge was relentless. In the crowded lecture hall, his voice cut through the murmurs like a knife as he publicly questioned the validity of her theories. Alara felt the eyes of her peers, some skeptical, others curious, fixated on her. Her heart pounded, but she met Jasper's gaze steadily, refusing to falter. "You're chasing shadows, Whitlock," he sneered. "These books rewrite themselves, sure, but that doesn't mean they hold truths about the future." "Perhaps," Alara replied quietly, "but shadows can reveal more than light sometimes." The clash underscored the growing divide between doubt and belief, a tension that threatened to unravel her fragile alliances. That night, alone in her cramped apartment, Alara pored over her notes, the cipher symbols blurring as exhaustion tugged at her eyelids. The personal loss she had suffered was a cruel reminder of the stakes involved, but also a source of unyielding resolve. She had crossed the breaking point. There was no turning back. Her fingers trembled as she traced the cryptic lines, whispering to the silent room, "I will rewrite this story, no matter the cost." Outside, the rain softened to a gentle drizzle, as if granting a fleeting moment of peace before the storm to come. Alara Whitlock's fingers trembled as she traced the cryptic symbols etched into the margins of the ancient manuscript. Her pulse quickened, not just from the revelation the cipher had whispered to her, but from the realization that the foundation of her fragile trust was crumbling. It had been Mina who first noticed the inconsistencies, subtle shifts in conversations, the misplaced notes in their shared research, the inexplicable absences. Alara, Mina had hissed in the quiet of the stacks, her voice barely more than a breath. "Someone's been watching us closer than we thought." Alara's mind raced back to the moments she had dismissed as paranoia, the too quick answers, the nervous glances, the way her ally had steered her attention away from certain texts, each memory now cast in a sinister light. She waited, heart pounding, as the footsteps approached, deliberate, measured. The figure emerged from the shadows, eyes flickering with a mixture of regret and resolve. "You shouldn't have seen that," the voice murmured, cold and unfamiliar. The confrontation was swift and suffocating. Words spilled over each other in a torrent of accusation and justification. The betrayal was not merely personal. It was a calculated move by the Ivory cult to dismantle the resistance from within. As the figure melted back into the labyrinthine corridors, Alara was left clutching the fragment of torn trust. Mina's presence was a bomb, her fierce loyalty a reminder that not all shadows concealed enemies. That evening, under the watchful gaze of Professor Alden Grey, Ilaros' resolve hardened. His cryptic warning, "Trust is a fragile artifact," easily shattered but painstakingly rebuilt code in her ears. The mentor's own history with the cult lent weight to his words, a cautionary tale etched in his gaunt features. Back in the solitude of her dorm room, surrounded by the flickering glow of candlelight, Alara studied the cipher anew. The texts seemed to ripple and change beneath her gaze, the library's rewriting magic now a cruel mirror of her fractured reality. Every line, every symbol, was a challenger call to outwit the unseen puppeteers. The veil of lies had been lifted, revealing a deeper, more insidious conspiracy. Yet, within the shadows of deception, Ilara found a sparker, renewed determination to expose the cult and reclaim the narrative of her own life. The path ahead was perilous and uncertain, but surrender was not an option. With a steadying breath, she reached for her notebook, pen poised to write the next chapter, not one dictated by fate, but forged by her own hand. The game had changed, and Alara would be ready. Outside, the library's ancient walls seemed to hold their breath, the very air humming with the tension of unspoken secrets. Somewhere beyond the stacks, the ivory masks waited in silence, their cold eyes waiting for the story to unfold. But Alara was no longer just a character in their tale. She was a challenger, a breaker of cycles, a bearer of hope cloaked in dread. And the final page was still unwritten. Alara Whitlock hunched over the ancient tome, her round glasses catching flickers of candlelight as her eyes darted across the pages. The ink seemed to dance, shifting subtly beneath her gaze, a maddening, hypnotic movement that both terrified and fascinated her. Each line of the cipher, once cryptic and impenetrable, now revealed new layers of meaning as she pieced together fragments she had overlooked before. Her breath came in shallow bursts, mingling with the musty scent of aged parchment and leather bindings. Outside, the wind whispered against the cracked stained glass windows, a mournful chorus that seemed to echo the urgency thudding in her chest. She traced the delicate, looping symbols with trembling fingers, feeling the weight of centuries pressing down through the text. The cipher was no longer just a prediction of crimes to commit, was a roadmap, a fragile thread woven through time that might lead her away from the fatal end she feared. A sudden creak drew her attention to the library's entrance, where Mina Solis appeared, her auburn curls illuminated by the faint glow of her laptop screen. "Alara," Mina whispered, eyes bright with anticipation. "I think I've found something in the digital archives that might help us decode the final layer. It's like the cipher has a second language, one that only reveals itself when combined with modern code." Ilara's heart surged with cautious hope as Mina settled beside her, fingers flying over the keyboard with practiced ease. The ancient symbols began to merge with digital fragments, a symphony of old and new knowledge unfolding before them. The air grew thick with concentration and the unspoken fear that time was slipping away. Suddenly, the silence was broken by the quiet footsteps of Professor Alden Gray. His tall, gaunt figure emerged from the shadows, silver hair catching the lamplight, and piercing blue eyes fixed intently on Ilara. "You tread dangerous ground, Ilara," he murmured, voice low and grave. "The cipher is not merely a prophecy. It is a trap set by those who believe fate is immutable. To attempt to rewrite it is to challenge forces that may consume you entirely." Ilara met his gaze, the mixture of warning and sorrow therein only deepening her resolve. "I have no choice," she replied softly but firmly. "If the final crime is truly my death, then I must find a way to change it, even if the cost is great." Professor Gray's eyes flickered with a shadow of old regrets. "Then you must be prepared to pay the price." Returning her focus to the tome, Ilara's eyes caught a subtle variation in the cipher's pattern, a series of blank spaces that pulsed faintly, as if alive. Her pulse quickened. This was the secret she had sensed, the unwritten passage hinted at in previous chapters of the code. Slowly, she began to transcribe the hidden message, each symbol resonating with an eerie clarity. The message described a ritual not of magic, but of narrative, manipulation and act that could alter the course of the final crime. It required a precise sequence of actions within the library's heart, a confrontation with the Ivory cult's influence at its source. But the text was clear. Such an attempt risked unraveling the very fabric of reality as the books rewrote themselves, with unknown consequences. Mina leaned closer, voice trembling with excitement and fear. "This could be our chance, Ilara, to break the cycle." Ilara nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Or it could be our doom." The weight of the choice settled upon her like the thick dust motes swirling in the library's stale air. Yet beneath the dread lay a fragile, flickering hope, a possibility that the story was not yet finished, that she could still write her own ending. As the clock ticked inexorably forward, Ilara gathered her courage and prepared to face the darkest chapter of her journey. The cipher's secret was no longer a mere puzzle. It was a call to arms, a desperate gamble against destiny itself. The library seemed to hold its breath, the shifting pages momentarily still, as Ilara whispered to herself, "This is not the end." And with that, the final act began. Inside, Ilara Whitlock sat across from Mina Solis, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of a single lamp hanging low over a wooden table scarred with the rings of countless cups. Around them, a handful of figures leaned in close, their eyes darting nervously as they exchanged hushed words. These were the defectors, former members of the Ivory cult, or its skeptics, who had turned their backs on the secret society's shadowy creed. Ilara's heart pounded as she listened to their stories. Each whispered revelation wove a tapestry of doubt and defiance. "They controlled the narrative of history," one woman murmured, her fingers trembling as she clutched a fragile leather notebook. "But when I saw the lives they were destroying, I couldn't stay silent anymore." Mina reached out, her hand steady on the woman's arm, offering an unspoken promise of safety and solidarity. "We're here to change the story," Mina said softly. Together, the meeting was fraught with tension. Every glance over a shoulder, every pause was a reminder of the dangers they faced. Yet the atmosphere crackled with a fragile hope. Here, in the dim light of the cafe's secluded back room, a resistance was born. Days later, Ilara returned to the library with a newfound purpose. The old building greeted her with the familiar scent of aged parchment and dust, the air heavy with secrets waiting to be uncovered. In the restricted archives, she spread out the documents handed to her by a defector, ancient manuscripts, coded letters, and cryptic marginalia that spoke of the cult's manipulations across centuries. The fluorescent lights above cast long shadows as Ilara's eyes scanned the fragile pages. Each symbol and phrase was a thread she could pull, unraveling the fabric of the Ivory cult's control. The deeper she delved, the more urgent her mission became. Every discovery was a step closer to understanding the machinery behind the rewriting of history itself. Meanwhile, Mina prowled the labyrinthine corridors of the library, her keen senses alert to every sound and movement. One evening, as she rounded a corner near the restricted stacks, a shadow detached itself from the darkness. An unknown figure whispered a warning, a fleeting glimpse of alliance or a trap. Ilara couldn't yet say. The cold stone walls seemed to close in, the echo of footsteps amplifying the sudden surge of paranoia. But Mina's resolve only hardened. "We don't have the luxury of fear," she whispered into the empty corridor. "Not now." Back in the cramped office that served as their war room, Ilara gathered her new allies. The space was cluttered with stacks of books, yellowed manuscripts, and stray notes scrawled in haste. A single desk lamp cast a pool of light over the determined faces around the table. They spoke in low tones, weaving plans and contingencies, each voice carrying the weight of desperation and hope. Professor Alden Gray joined them briefly, his piercing blue eyes reflecting the flicker of the lamp. "The cult's grip extends further than you realize," he warned, "but their certainty is their weakness. You must exploit the cracks in their narrative." Ilara nodded, feeling the immense burden of the path ahead. "We'll need to be smarter, faster united." The alliance was fragile, built on mutual suspicion and the shared desire to break free from the Ivory cult's deterministic hold. Yet in that small, cluttered room, they found strength in numbers, a flicker of light in the encroaching darkness. As the night deepened, Ilara couldn't shake a growing question from her mind. Could they truly trust one another? The cult had sown seeds of doubt and betrayal for centuries. Their greatest enemy might not just be the Ivory cult itself, but the fractures it had planted within those who dared to resist. But for now, there was work to be done. The cipher awaited, the next pages yet to be deciphered, and the final crime still looming on the horizon. Ilara pushed her doubts aside, focusing on the mission that had become her life. "We write our own story," she whispered to Mina as they closed the door behind them, stepping back into the shifting shadows of the library. "And this time, we decide how it ends." Ilara Whitlock moved cautiously between the towering stacks, the air thick with the scent of aged paper and dust, but beneath it, something indefinable, an undercurrent of uncertainty permeated the space. The books seemed to breathe, their pages fluttering in a breeze she could not feel, whispering secrets that twisted and turned just beyond comprehension. Beside her, Mina Solis's footsteps echoed softly. The usual spark in Mina's eyes was tempered with worry. "Do you feel it too?" Mina whispered, her voice barely above the rustling pages. Ilara nodded, adjusting her round glasses. "It's like the library itself is watching us, changing with every step we take. The cipher, it's getting harder to read. The words shift before I can grasp their meaning." They paused at a junction where the shelves curved unnaturally, the titles on the spines warping and rearranging themselves, histories becoming myths, facts folding into fables. Ilara's breath hitched as the realization dawned. Anew the rewriting was accelerating, the boundary between the past and present thinning like fragile parchment. "We don't have much time," Ilara said, voice tight. "The final crime, the one the cipher predicts, it's coming soon." Mina clenched her jaw. "We need Professor Gray's insight. He might hold the key to understanding what the cult plans next." The professor awaited them in a shadowed alcove near the library's eastern wing, his silver hair catching the dim light like a halo. His piercing blue eyes regarded them with a mix of caution and urgency. "You tread a dangerous path," he began, voice low but resonant. "The ivory cult's grip tightens. They manipulate not just history, but the very fabric of reality here. The rewriting books are their instruments, and soon they will attempt to seal their design." He paused, searching their faces. "But there is a fracture in their plan and opening if you dare to exploit it." Alara leaned forward, heart pounding. "What must I do?" Professor Gray's gaze sharpened. "Decode the final layers of the cipher. But beware, the closer you get, the more the library will resist. You'll face threats not just from the cult, but from the very walls around you." As he spoke, the faint hum of shifting pages grew louder, a chorus of mutating stories echoing through the stacks. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died. Darkness swallowed the library whole. Ilara's pulse quickened. "Mina," a soft gasp answered her. Around them, shadows coalesced, and distant footsteps echoed a reminder that unseen eyes watched their every move. The library was alive, unpredictable, and hostile. With trembling hands, Ilara struck a match. The tiny flame wavered before steadying. The flickering candle cast long shadows that danced along the walls, which now seemed to ripple like water. The books around them shimmered, their titles blurring, their pages flowing like ink in a stream. At a secluded reading table, Alara spread fragments of the ancient cipher before her. Each symbol and line was a thread in the tapestry of fate she sought to unravel. Her fingers traced the letters, desperate to extract meaning from the chaos. "We can't let them win," she whispered, more to herself than to Mina. "If the final crime is my death, then I have to rewrite the narrative, change the ending." Mina reached out, gripping Ilara's hand firmly. "We'll do it together, no matter what comes." But even as they clung to hope, a shiver of doubt settled in Ilara's mind. The library's walls seemed to pulse with a living heartbeat, and the shadows whispered warnings she could not ignore. The storm was gathering, and soon she would stand at its very eye. Outside, the night deepened, but inside, the battle for fate had already begun. The air was cooler here, thick with the scent of aged parchment and a faint trace of dust that whispered of forgotten histories. Her fingers trailed along the spines of the books, some of which seemed to pulse faintly beneath her touch, as if alive with secrets yet to be unearthed. She had returned to the restricted section, driven by a restless urgency to uncover whatever truths lay beyond the surface of the cryptic cipher. Her footsteps echoed softly against the stone floor, the only sound amid the towering shelves that stretched like ancient sentinels toward the high, vaulted ceiling. As she rounded a corner near the back of the library, her breath caught. There, half concealed behind an overgrown tapestry and a leaning row of neglected tomes, was a section of the wall that looked oddly out of place. The stone was smoother here, the seams less visible, as if it had been crafted to conceal rather than support. Alara's heart quickened. She recalled the hints Professor Gray had dropped in his last cryptic lecture whispers of a secret chamber hidden within the library's deepest recesses, a place that housed the very mechanism by which the rewriting of history was controlled. She knelt, brushing away years of dust and cobwebs from a stone slab that, to the casual eye, seemed merely part of the wall. Her fingers traced a faint pattern carved into it, a delicate swirl of symbols that matched those she had seen in the cipher. With a tentative push, the slab gave way, shifting silently. A soft, mechanical grinding sound filled the air as the walls slid open, revealing a narrow passage dimly illuminated by flickering sconces. Alara hesitated only for a moment before stepping inside, the cool air wrapping around her like a cloak. The passage led to a hidden chamber, a sanctum filled with an array of curious instruments and artifacts. Gears of brass and iron, ancient levers etched with arcane runes, and delicate glass tubes filled with swirling mists stood arranged on tables and shelves. Her breath hitched as she took in the sight. This was the heart of the library's secret, the source of its uncanny power to rewrite the narratives contained within its walls. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal fashioned from ivory and dark wood, upon which rested an amulet carved with shifting symbols that seemed almost alive. The air thrummed with a quiet energy, as though the chamber itself was aware of her presence. Suddenly, a shadow moved near the entrance. Alara turned to see Professor Alden Grey step into the chamber, his tall, gaunt form silhouetted against the flickering light. His piercing blue eyes regarded her with a mixture of concern and something deeper, perhaps regret. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly, his voice low and grave. "This place is not meant for the curious. Its mechanisms are ancient and dangerous. To tamper with them is to invite chaos." Alara met his gaze steadily, the weight of her discovery pressing upon her. "I have to understand," she replied, voice firm despite the tremor within. "If these machines control the rewriting of the books, then they hold the key to the cipher and to stopping the final crime they predict." Professor Grey sighed, stepping closer to the amulet. "The Ivory cult has guarded this chamber for centuries, using these devices to manipulate the flow of history itself. Their obsession with predestination has blinded them to the cost." As he spoke, the heavy oak door at the chamber's entrance creaked open once more. Librarian Marlowe appeared, his dark cloak swirling around him like a shadow made flesh. His eyes, sharp and unreadable beneath his hood, flicked between Alara and Professor Grey. He said nothing, but the weight of his silent scrutiny sent a shiver down Alara's spine. "Marlowe," Grey acknowledged him with a nod. "You should not interfere." The librarian merely inclined his head, a faint, enigmatic smile brushing his lips. Then, as silently as he had come, he vanished back into the shadows from which he had emerged. Left in the charged silence of the chamber, Alara stepped forward to the pedestal once more. She reached out, her fingers closing around the ivory amulet. The symbols beneath her touch shifted and pulsed, the faint hum of the chamber growing louder, resonating deep within her chest. Suddenly, the room seemed to tilt, the walls breathing and warping as if the very fabric of reality was fluid here. Alara's mind swelled with possibilities and dangers. Could she, by manipulating these mechanisms, rewrite her own narrative? Could she break free from the fatalistic cycle the cipher had forewarned? Her fingers tightened on the amulet, determination igniting within her. The battle for control over the written fate was no longer confined to cryptic codes and shadowed whispers. It was here, in this secret chamber, where history itself could be bent or broken. Outside, the library's ancient halls seemed to hold their breath, waiting for the next page to be turned. Alara's pulse quickened as she studied the intricate network of gears and dials. She traced the arcane symbols engraved on the brass plates, recognizing some from the cipher, spirals that denoted time's cyclical nature, angular runes representing fate's binding chains. Each mechanism appeared calibrated to subtly alter the contents of the books, shifting narratives like threads in a loom. "How does it work?" she whispered, more to herself than to Grey. "The cult devised this apparatus centuries ago," Grey explained, moving to a nearby console. "It channels the collective memory of the library, imprinting new events onto the manuscripts. By activating certain sequences, they can rewrite histories, erase unwanted truths, and inscribed the future with their chosen designs. Alara felt the weight of his words settle heavily. This was no mere metaphorical rewriting. The book's shifting stories were direct consequences of this mechanical marvel, a tangible expression of the cult's obsession with predetermination. "And what about the gaps? The unwritten pages I've seen?" she asked. Gray's eyes darkened. "Those are the blank slates, the future yet to be inscribed. The cult fears these spaces because they represent uncertainty, chaos beyond their control." The room hummed softly as Alara turned her attention back to the amulet. She held it up to the dim light, watching the symbols shift like living things across its surface. A sudden impulse urged her to experiment. Carefully, she aligned the amulet with a corresponding indentation on the pedestal. The chamber vibrated, the gears clicking into motion with a slow, deliberate rhythm. A panel on the far wall slid open, revealing a hidden alcove filled with ancient manuscripts and scrolls. Among them, Alara spotted a ledger bound in cracked leather, its cover embossed with the same ivory mask symbol she had seen in the cult's gatherings. "This must be a record of their manipulations," she said breathlessly, reaching for it. Before she could open it, Gray's hand rested lightly on her shoulder. "Be cautious. The cult's knowledge is powerful but dangerous. Every alteration here echoes beyond these walls." Alara nodded but felt a spark of rebellion. The cipher had predicted her death, yet here lay the tools to challenge that fate. She opened the ledger, scanning the faded inks that recorded changes made through the ages eras rewritten, figures erased or exalted, events rearranged to serve the cult's vision. As she read, a cold realization took hold. Her parents' disappearance was likely another thread woven into this grand design. Suddenly, a distant clang echoed through the library. The hidden chamber seemed to grow colder, shadows lengthening as if the space itself was warning her to stop. "We are not alone," Gray murmured, eyes narrowing toward the door. Alara's heart pounded. The Ivory cult's agents were closing in, their grip tightening. But armed with this newfound understanding, she felt a fragile hope. Perhaps the cycle could be broken. With one last glance at the ancient mechanisms, she pocketed the amulet and closed the ledger. The path ahead was perilous, but knowledge was her weapon, and the hidden chamber her battleground. As she stepped back through the secret passage, the door slid shut behind her with a final, resolute thud. The library resumed its quiet vigil, but the story was far from over. Outside, the first stars pierced the night sky, silent witnesses to a fate still unwritten.